You ever notice how peace never gets loud until someone decides to take it from you? For 3 years, my family and I lived quietly out here. No drama, no noise, no HOA meetings trying to measure your mailbox or fine you for planting the wrong kind of flowers. Just gravel under the tires, jasmine in the air, and enough space to breathe. Then one night that peace was stolen. It started with the smell. Hot asphalt burning through the cool Texas air. By the time I stepped outside, the damage was done. My private gravel driveway, the one I paid $80,000 for, specifically to stay outside HOA control, was buried under a fresh coat of blacktop I never asked for. Fence posts ripped up. Survey markers smashed flat. And sitting on top of it all, a letter. Community Access Improvement Project. A $3,200 bill. And a demand for monthly fees. That's when I realized this wasn't about roads or standards. It was about control. They paved over my property rights and expected me to thank them for it. What they didn't know, I built roads for a living. And I'm not the kind of man who lets someone else tell me where mine ends. They say peace of mind has a price tag. And for me, it was $80,000 of pure private gravel. 3 years ago, I walked away from city chaos and concrete dust, sold my Dallas construction company, packed up with my wife Elena and moved to the Texas Hill Country, 3 acres of rolling oak and quiet air. That was the dream. Our home sat nearly 400 yards off the main road, tucked behind a winding drive that crackled under the tires like old radio static. That road wasn't just dirt, it was freedom. I'd bought it separately, deeded, recorded, mine alone. No HOA signatures, no shared access, no fine print hidden under community bylaws. The man who sold it to me, George Blackwood, was no fool. Back in 1987, he carved that strip out specifically to stay clear of neighborhood politics. The paperwork was airtight, private access in perpetuity, sealed before Willowbrook Commons ever existed. Elena, a high school principal, called it our peace road. Sophia, our 15-year-old, said it felt like driving into a postcard. Evenings were slow, quiet, and honest. Jasmine blooming, mockingbirds singing. Gravel crunching just enough to let you know you were home. Next door, though, was order and obsession, Willowbrook Commons, ruled by its president Vivian Ashworth, a realtor with a ruler and a grudge. The kind of person who called enforcement community service. We hadn't met yet. But the invisible line between her world and mine was about to turn into the most expensive argument over gravel in Texas. Morning doesn't always start with birds and coffee. Sometimes it starts with diesel engines and the smell of burnt tar. That March sunrise hit different. I opened the door and froze. My gravel driveway, the same road I'd graded and leveled myself, was gone. In its place shimmered a slick coat of asphalt, still warm, still smoking. Fence posts lay tossed like bones. The survey markers I'd paid to have installed were bent, hammered, and buried. And standing at the entrance were 2 stone pillars I'd never approved, topped with brass plaques that read, Willowbrook Commons Grand Entrance, Eastern 2023. A crew in reflective vests packed up their gear, looking at me like I was trespassing on my own property. When I asked who authorized the work, the foreman handed me a clipboard stamped with a neat signature. Vivian Ashworth. Project name Community Access Improvement. By noon, a certified letter landed in my mailbox. $3,200 for the upgrade, plus an $85 monthly maintenance fee. The tone was pure arrogance. My rustic access now met community standards. That evening, a uniformed guard appeared at the road's mouth, checking IDs like it was a gated estate. When I asked what he was doing, he said, just following HOA protocol. That's when I drove straight to the county office. No permits, no applications, nothing. Within 48 hours, a bright orange stop work order fluttered across those shiny new pillars. To Vivian, it was progress. To me, it was vandalism with stationery. The battle line was now paved, literally. You'd think a county stop work order would slow someone down. But for Vivian Ashworth, it was just a new challenge. Within a week, the HOA held what they called an emergency board meeting. I wasn't invited, of course, but word travels fast in small communities, especially when your neighbor's a retired Marine with excellent hearing. According to Marcus Webb, Vivian spent an hour pacing that clubhouse floor, painting me as the villain. Obstructing community progress, she called it. Hurting property values. The board voted to fine me $500 per day until I restored the community access area, my private driveway. The next morning, I got the certified letter, signed, sealed, and ridiculous. It also declared me persona non grata within Willowbrook Commons. Imagine being banned from land you legally own. Then came the neighborhood campaign. Facebook posts about my unsafe access road. Flyers at the mailbox warning about my legal obstruction. Elena came home shaking after two neighbors cornered her at the grocery store, whispering about financial trouble. That's how HOAs fight wars, through whispers. Not weapons, but they underestimated my patience and my paper trail. I hired a licensed surveyor to remark the property. GPS precise. Cost $3,200. Poetic considering that's exactly what Vivian had charged me for destroying it. Then I called in an old friend, Rex Donovan, a retired sheriff's deputy turned investigator. Within days, he started digging into county records and noticed something interesting. Multiple land transfers under shell companies tied to Vivian. While she played politics, I built evidence. Because in my world, truth doesn't shout, it stacks. Document by document until it can't be ignored. When paper starts piling up against them, people like Vivian don't back down, they double down. The first strike came wrapped in legal stationery. A cease and desist letter from Peyton and Associates, a law firm I recognized from my old business days. It accused me of damaging community property by driving survey stakes into what they called shared access land. Their client, the Willowbrook Commons Homeowners Association. The remedy they demanded? $50,000 and an apology. I almost laughed. My crime was marking my own boundary. 2 days later, another surprise. The county planning office suddenly misplaced my survey documents. The clerk handling my file, a woman who by coincidence or bloodline shared Vivian's last name, told me I'd need to reapply for driveway access. Filing fee, $2,800. Estimated approval, 6 to 8 months. In the meantime, my road would be considered unverified. That word, unverified, was the weapon. Without paperwork on file, they could argue anything. Then came the beautification walks. Groups of neighbors, led by Vivian herself, strolling past my property with clipboards and cell phones, taking pictures of our fence, our landscaping, even the mailbox. Each morning I'd step outside to the sound of camera shutters instead of songbirds. Their photos started appearing online, captioned with phrases like potential, fire hazard, or non-compliant vegetation. It wasn't about grass or gravel anymore, it was about pressure. But if there's one thing I've learned from years in construction, it's this: paper trails don't lie forever. The same system they used to bury me was the one I planned to use to expose them. You can fight a legal battle in court, but an image war? That one happens on front pages and Facebook feeds. A week after the cease and desist, the local newspaper ran a headline that stopped me cold. Property dispute divides Willowbrook community. The photo showed my house like an island, surrounded by the words progress and improvement. Vivian had clearly coached the reporter. Her quotes sounded rehearsed, polished, dripping with faux sympathy. We're simply bringing everyone up to community standards. My side got a single paragraph buried below a bake sale ad. The fallout was fast. An anonymous safety concern triggered a call from my home insurance company. They claimed the newly paved road had increased liability risk, bumping my premium by $4,000 a year. Same week, Elena, my wife, the high school principal, got pulled aside by a school board member who just wanted to check in. Someone had emailed the board, warning that her husband's legal hostility might reflect poorly on her judgment. It was a full-spectrum campaign. Legal, financial, and personal. Then came the knockout attempt. Vivian filed a petition with the City Planning Commission to have my driveway officially reclassified as a public thoroughfare. If it passed, the city could seize it under community benefit, paying me pennies on the dollar. The public hearing was set for next month. But here's the thing about paper wars, they cut both ways. While she was building headlines, I was building allies. Quietly, more neighbors started reaching out, people tired of being bullied, people who'd seen enough. A line had been crossed, and this time I wasn't the only one ready to fight back. When you're dealing with people who bend rules, the truth usually hides in old paper. That's where Rex came in. He spent 3 days buried in courthouse files that smelled like dust and neglect. What he found changed everything. Back in 1987, George Blackwood, the old rancher who sold me the property, had filed a deed restriction so airtight it might as well have been carved in granite. It read, "Access road shall remain private property in perpetuity, not subject to any homeowner association covenants, assessments, or interference whatsoever, not just signed, notarized, filed, cross-referenced, every box checked." That single paragraph made my driveway untouchable under county law. But Rex didn't stop there. He followed the money. Turns out Vivian's so-called community improvement projects were funded by shell companies she controlled. Over 18 months, those companies had borrowed nearly $2.4 million, using future HOA fees as collateral. She was literally gambling on forcing people like me into membership. Then came the kicker. Her brother-in-law, County Commissioner Bradley Morse, had personally approved no-bid contracts worth $47,000 for emergency landscaping and access upgrades. Paperwork signed, stamped, and filed by the same office that had mysteriously lost my survey. And tucked in those permits were EPA violations, unauthorized, drainage changes, and destroyed runoff channels. That cut straight through protected wetland zones. That's when it stopped being a neighborhood feud. This wasn't just harassment. It was a full-blown development scheme built on fraud, nepotism, and environmental crime. Vivian wasn't fighting for control of my driveway. She was fighting for her financial survival. And for the first time since this started, I had her cornered with nothing but the truth. Once you've got proof, the next move is strategy. So I called in the big guns. Catherine Silverman, property rights attorney. Reputation sharp enough to draw blood. 94% win rate and a habit of making opposing counsel cry before trial. When I showed her the deed, the permits, and Rex's findings, she didn't even look surprised. She just said, "We'll end this on paper before it ever reaches a courtroom." Her plan was brilliant, 2 moves perfectly timed. A quiet title action to lock down my ownership, and a federal environmental complaint to drag every shady permit into daylight. Both filed the same week as the HOA's public hearing. Meanwhile, my garage turned into a command center. Marcus handled security and video documentation. Dr. Patricia Hernandez compiled medical records showing community stress, and Janet Kowalski tracked HOA finances with teacher-level precision. Rex assembled every piece of evidence into binders thick enough to stop bullets. We created the Willowbrook Property Rights Alliance, posting facts online, no drama, just documents. Membership hit triple digits in 2 days. Neighbors started telling their stories. The narrative was shifting. Then came the insurance strike. Catherine filed a claim against the HOA's liability policy, forcing the insurer to open an investigation. If fraud surfaced, the policy would be voided, and board members would be personally liable for every dollar they'd misused. For the first time, Vivian was reacting instead of attacking. I'd spent months fighting from the shadows. Now the light was finally on my side. It's funny how people who preach community values tend to do their worst work after midnight. Around 2 in the morning, Marcus's security cameras caught the first signs of movement. unmarked trucks, portable floodlights, and the faint hiss of fresh asphalt. Vivian herself stood at the edge of the property, clipboard in hand, directing workers like a general. They were installing speed bumps and residents-only signs on my driveway, as if rebranding it would make it theirs. By sunrise, the road looked like a construction zone, not a home entrance. But Vivian wasn't done. The next afternoon, she found Elena in the school parking lot. Same smile, same perfume, same poison. "Elena, honey, I know this has been stressful. I can make it all go away. 25,000 cash, just dropped the lawsuit." Elena hit record on her phone halfway through. That clip captured Vivian admitting the money came from the Community Improvement Fund, which Rex's audit had already traced to missing HOA dues. It was blackmail disguised as kindness, and now it was evidence. Then came the retaliation. Anonymous calls to the fire marshal about hazardous materials in my workshop. Letters to Child Protective Services about unsafe living conditions. Each complaint was investigated. Each dismissed, but everyone stole hours, energy, and peace. By the end of the week, someone destroyed our mailbox with a bat. Our grass wilted overnight from herbicide, and orange paint splashed across our siding like a signature. That's the thing about bullies. They escalate right before they break. Vivian was getting desperate. And desperation leaves fingerprints. When intimidation stops working, people like Vivian turn chaos into theater. She called it Community Action Day. Flyers went out promising barbecue, lemonade, and neighborhood pride. What actually showed up were 20 neighbors with bolt cutters, sledgehammers, and matching shirts reading Willowbrook Pride. Their mission? Tear down my illegal survey markers, security cameras, and non-conforming signage. I watched from my porch as the convoy of trucks rolled in. The sound of tailgates slamming, tools clanking, and engines idling filled the morning air. It looked less like a volunteer project and more like a demolition crew waiting for orders. Vivian stepped out of her BMW like she was leading a parade, clipboard in one hand, bolt cutters in the other. "Morning, neighbors," she called out sweetly. "Time to bring this corner of our community up to proper standards." That's when Deputy Rodriguez appeared, summoned quietly by Marcus an hour earlier. Calm, steady, hand resting on his radio. "Ma'am," he said, "you're trespassing on private property." Vivian tried to spin it, accusing the deputy of harassing taxpayers, but when she crossed the property line with tools in hand, the cuffs clicked. The crowd froze. Two of her volunteers followed her straight into patrol cars. Here's where karma met cameras. Vivian had invited a local TV crew expecting sympathy coverage. Instead, they filmed her arrest live on air. By sunset, that footage was everywhere: Facebook, YouTube, evening news. Her empire of intimidation crumbled in a single afternoon. And while she spent 72 hours behind bars, the real storm was just beginning. The FBI and EPA had started asking questions. Vivian hadn't just paved a road. She'd paved her own path straight into a federal investigation. Some fights end in noise. Others end in silence when the truth finally speaks for itself. In federal court, the evidence spoke louder than any accusation ever could. 847 exhibits, deeds, permits, audit reports, camera footage, and one perfectly clear recording of a bribe. The jury didn't need long. Vivian Ashworth was sentenced to 8 years in federal prison, her assets seized under criminal forfeiture. The court called it a deliberate abuse of position for personal gain. Her brother-in-law, Commissioner Bradley Morse, followed soon after, guilty of collusion and falsified permits. Civil court handled the rest. The HOA paid $480,000 in damages and legal fees. The judge tripled certain counts under RICO, calling the board's actions organized extortion under the guise of governance. The EPA issued $2.1 million in environmental restoration orders, drainage repaired, wetlands restored, and runoff channels rebuilt. My once-stolen driveway became the boundary of a protected wildlife corridor, with a gravel path leading to new educational signs explaining the case. The irony wasn't lost on me. My fight for privacy had become a public lesson in accountability. The HOA was restructured under new leadership. Dr. Patricia Hernandez took over as president. Dues dropped, kickbacks vanished, and transparency became policy. Elena was promoted soon after. Sophia won a scholarship essay contest about standing your ground. And me? I rebuilt the gate. No plaque, no asphalt, no grand entrance. Just gravel, cedar posts, and peace. People say revenge feels good. But justice lasts longer, if you believe accountability still matters. Tap like and help this story reach more people. One click helps expose how power really works in our neighborhoods. This wasn't just about one driveway. It was about standing your ground when the system says you can't. Because the moment ordinary people start keeping records, even the powerful have to play fair. Subscribe for more real stories that prove justice isn't loud, it's patient.